Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to this next episode of our podcast, where we read the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, and we go through it line by line. And we have reached the third part of chapter number 5. The chapter is called The Perfume Saint, and we are finishing this chapter, this time in 3 episodes. And I have with me the usual crowd, Priyank, Lauren, Chris. How are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. Enjoying the summer?
Very good, thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very good. And we are like all in our native, or in not our native countries, but we're all in different countries again. We were recently all in London, and now Chris is in Northern Ireland. I'm back in LA. So yeah. So let's get on with part 3 of chapter 5. We in episode 2 so Guruji went to the perfume saint. His name is Gandha Baba, and they had a very interesting exchange. And now, so he made his hand smell a certain perfume, right? And then he also gave him a scent. Guruji gave him a scentless flower, and he made it smell like jasmine. And now Guruji is coming home, and the first person that he meets is his sister Uma. And Uma, basically, the first thing she notices about him, he has this really nice smell about him, and she goes like, "Oh, you are quite stylish." And then he basically lets her smell his fragrance, and then he also lets her smell this scentless flower, and it smells like jasmine. And Uma has her eyes closed, so she goes like, "Oh, amazing, there's jasmine." And then she looks at it and she goes like, "Oh, this is unexpected. Why
Rose,
is this?"
Rose, wasn't it?
So rose, I think, is the fragrance that he has on his body.
On his palm. Oh, palm. Oh,
palm.
Yeah, hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And then jasmine is the fragrance he has on the scentless flower, right? So she takes the flower, looks at it, and goes like, "What is that? This is not jasmine." Not that I would know what a jasmine flower looks like. But anyways, this is kind of Mukunda is happy to see that. So that means that this is an actual manifestation, because he had the suspicion that he was just hypnotized when he went there. Yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, Guruji enters the sentence that he silently placed the astrally scented blossom under her nostrils.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the word astral is packed with hidden stuff for us, and especially in this whole book, isn't it? So, which would kind of imply that it's kind of something that's miraculously generated, as opposed to just natural, the physical sciences that we know and love, or know and understand, shall we say? So yeah, I think that's a good little insertion there.
Yeah, for sure. So there's something going on. We heard a little bit about astral manifestations before, like when he talked about the amulet, for example, and other parts. And it's the same kind of science that was used here. And that is Guruji was very, I would say, skeptical in the beginning of this chapter, right? About Gandha Baba. He was like, why is he showing off his powers like this? And so at least this is something where he goes like, okay, this is like an actual manifestation. Yeah, Priyank?
Do you think all astral, anything that's of a miracle type feel, has got some astral energy to it, or an astral like awareness in manifesting a miracle, etc.?
I would think so. I mean, it does seem to have a transitory nature. Everything that's astral, like it's not as permanent as other things, and they tend to not last very long. But I feel like that's like when miracles happen. That's how they are usually that's how Guruji describes it. I feel like in the autobiography, that's how they usually happen. Yeah, there's a chapter way later where Sri Yukteswar comes back and they talk about this as well. So, but let's not talk about this now.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then they kind of they talk about this. They talk about the jasmine, and Priyank had like a point about jasmine.
Yes, jasmine is often is a very favorite scent amongst Indians. Like you know, back in the day, you wouldn't have perfume as such, but you would use flowers to use their fragrance naturally. So there's this thing called Veni, which means you basically bunch jasmine together, or this heavier flower that's a bit like the jasmine we have here, or in the UK is this like 5-petaled jasmine, but this other jasmine in India is like this heavy flower, and it's much more fragrant, and they've just tie it to their hair, and it's like it's more potent than any perfume you'll smell. And everyone, if a woman puts it in her hair, it'll be like a fresh batch in the morning, and it lasts the whole day, and then in the evening the flower will start wilting. So that's quite nice. My wife wanted to grow some jasmine in this country, or in my garden, which we've just started doing. I remember when we went to the garden shop.
Were they laughing at you?
They did, because my wife and I said, can we buy some British jasmine? And they're like, I don't know what British jasmine is, but we've got some jasmine, and then said some like Latin name, and then we were like, oh yeah, jasmine probably isn't indigenous to Britain, so there's no such thing as British jasmine. we've been so indoctrinated through like education that everything's British, but clearly it isn't.
Well, yeah, I would have some things to say now, but no, I don't want to. You might need a greenhouse to grow it, right? I heard
no,
that's
it's
quite
growing.
popular.
I just had my first blossom yesterday.
Oh, really?
Beautiful.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. And what's the smell like? Is that what you expected?
Divine, yes, it is.
Divine.
We've got jasmine officinale, whatever that means.
Okay, nice. So you're like an expert at jasmine now. That's good. You can hand out when I need jasmine the next time. I'll just come to you, Brian.
You got you covered.
Nice. Yeah. And so this the scene kind of concludes like that he's happy that she can smell it. She smells both the rose fragrance, the jasmine fragrance, and suspects that there was some astral power in play rather than hypnosis, and that is what he was hoping for. Yes, Brent?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, because he's like, this kind of shows he's deducing like what's happened. So he's still working out how this whole manifestation, like how this whole astral miracle took place, or how he was able to produce these astral fragrances, astrally produced fragrances. So in this kind of paragraph, it shows that he's got his thinking cap. He hasn't just worked it out there and then when he met the perfume saint. He was reflecting on it as he left and made it home.
There's definitely a high level of skepticism on Mukunda's side throughout, and he only gets a bit disarmed slowly, bit by bit. But I guess that's also maybe the approach that he would teach us towards someone who does miracles, right? Like first have a high degree of skepticism, and only when there is no doubt left, then you go like, okay, there's some astral powers in play here. All right. So let's move on to, so then later, Guruji has a friend, Alakananda, and he actually says he had a encounter with Gandha Baba, the perfume saint, as well. And what happened there was he was invited to like a gala dinner, and a lot of people who were at that dinner, they knew about Gandha Baba, and they knew that he had this reputation of making things appear out of thin air. And so he requested him to materialize some tangerines, and tangerines were not in season. And I guess we're also in the early 1900s there. So when something was out of season back then, it was just not there, right? So he had, the way I imagine this scene is they were like at a big table, and everyone had their plates, and on each plate there was a luci, which is a bread. And when he kind of said he wanted tangerines, he materialized a peeled tangerine inside each of those luci breads. So that's why he says they puffed up. And it's good that we're doing this podcast. So I'm finally understanding how this works, because in the beginning I didn't actually know what a luci was. I in the beginning thought maybe this is another fruit or something like that, and he turned one fruit into another fruit or something. But now I think I got the picture right now, and I'm sure Priyank ate many lucis and knows exactly what this is, and I did not. Yeah.
So
Priyank?
they kind of, when you make them, they puff up. So, but then when you've like putting them in on a dish, slowly flattening, especially if they're one on top of each other, and then obviously be flat. So the kind of miracle here is that it kind of re-energized it with that, and then he's inserted through astrally generated. Was it what was it? A
Tangerine.
Tangerine. I don't know what the difference between tangerine and orange and clementine and all that stuff is, but one of those produced one of those, and then it just puffed up. So it kind of re-energizes. So you always, when you eat those, you want it in its like puffed up state. That shows that it's fresh, and hence this has now got another layer, because it was not just puffed up; it had the fruit inside it, and the fruit was peeled with none of those white tutas, as we call them in Gujarati, but I don't know what you guys call them in English. The white fiber. Some people don't like.
Pith, I think.
Pith.
P-I-T-H.
Pithy.
Yeah. Pithy. Yeah. Although I'm really curious as to why he decided to perform the miracle with the tangerines inside of the bread. Why not just let them appear in front of the eyes?
So it's because, as I said, we prefer to have them like raised like this. So it would have been flat. So he's re-energized, kind of reinvigorated it, made it look like more of a spectacle.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah.
And isn't that bread like a savory thing? Would you eat like bread, like a luci bread with tangerines? Is that a thing?
No, you wouldn't. Definitely wouldn't. But at this part of India, I don't know. I'm gonna go there soon. I'll let you know.
And luci, is that like similar to like a fried bread that's puffed up with hot air, like a puri or a bhatura?
Correct. Yeah. Puri.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So I'm glad I'm getting educated here as well. Just good. So basically, that was the miracle that Alakananda talked about, and that happened in front of a lot of people. So that's another kind of proof that Gandha Baba has those kind of abilities to kind of produce food or fragrances out of nowhere. And Guruji goes on then. He says after many years, he had basically, he says, by inner realization. So he has basically understood how he did it later on. And he mentions that he wishes that this technique would be available to the hungry masses of the world. If it was so easy to do, if it was just a technique that everyone could learn and produce their own food. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Yeah, Priyank?
Do you think that pretty deep question, but this obviously worked out that he didn't he wasn't able to, or the saints don't heal the world of hunger and poverty. They kind of focus more on like the spiritual upliftment of the population, or the majority of the people, as many people as they can touch. But why do you think it is that they don't focus on healing the physical needs of the humanity, as opposed to working on what they do work on, Chris?
Free will. Is that not part of the answer, at least? It's free will. That we, at some level, are choosing our existence and our actions sort of throughout lifetimes are by our own choice. So,
My thought was something similar, and also that this world is one of suffering, where we can live out our desires and pains and pleasures, and hunger and poverty, I suppose, part of that duality. Whereas if that didn't exist, then it wouldn't be painful. We wouldn't want to get out, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about this, didn't we, on a previous episode? You know, how suffering can take us closer, and that's definitely true. I think also maybe if it was God's will for there to be no suffering in this world, it would be so, but it's not. So, you know, I believe Guruji goes on to say something like to do with this in later on in this chapter, but you know, they say that true masters are attuned with the cosmic will. So if one is truly attuned, then one wouldn't try to make hunger abolished, because that's not the will of the creator, right? But yeah, it's definitely a ponderous question, Priyank.
Yeah, it's really hard to wrap your head around. There's a little booklet that SF releases called Why God Permits Evil, and it's explained in there really well. It's basically, I don't know if I can explain it well, but it's kind of what all of you guys said, that we are in this world here not to have the perfect life. We're in this world actually to learn how to get out. And that's why there is all the duality here, the good and the evil.
The motion picture, the dream,
Yes,
the dreamer's dream.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is that, and there is Gandha Baba's technique to materialize things is unfortunately beyond everyone. It's actually a really sophisticated technique that is, I think, reserved for realized masters. So we'll talk about a similar thing later on, where we talk about the saints that don't eat, right? We have two in this book, and both of them, they also say that they wouldn't want to give the technique that they use away to everyone because God doesn't wish it. So yeah, and Guruji goes on though. He explains not just that this is an astral technique. He goes into more detail. He talks about that there are different vibrations and electrons and protons, and then he says there is vibrations that are regulated by lifetrons, which is a term that Guruji uses throughout this book and throughout his literature. And I'm not really sure if it has a corresponding meaning in our contemporary science or physics, but he does talk about it, and he says just by subtly making subtle changes to the energies out there, you can just achieve like the goals that Gandha Baba achieved, like materializing little things and or materializing fragrances. And I have a question for you guys. Why do you think it was important for him to make the point to say that those were actually materializations and not an auto-suggestive state or hypnosis? Why do you think he kind of had to make this point in this chapter?
I think two reasons. One because he was showing us the art of the possible and how much we are in delusion about how limited our capabilities are. And secondary, and we'll discuss this a bit later, about the dangers of hypnotism and other things that we meddle with that we shouldn't, perhaps.
I tend to agree with you. I think this kind of skepticism that Guruji had, he was like trained in this already. He had probably seen many saints, and maybe he had come across some people who weren't really saints and who were hypnotizing their subjects. He didn't mention them here in the book, but this might be also one of the reasons why he mentioned it here. So, having said that, then Guruji goes more into detail about hypnotism itself, and he mentions it as a technique that is used by physicians who are, for some reason, they need to do a surgery or they need to do something that is painful to their patients, but they can't use an anesthetic. And so hypnotism kind of takes your mind off the pain, maybe. And he also says that it is not a thing that you should subject yourself to often. He calls it trespassing into someone else's mind. And he says that after going through it multiple times, it has a negative effect on your brain cells. So it's definitely something you should avoid. You should not let yourself be hypnotized on a regular basis. So there's a word of warning here. Priyank?
If ever should you let yourself be hypnotized, given Guruji's very blunt warning, and it doesn't leave any room for interpretation here, does he? You are in, sooner or later, not sooner or later on you'll suffer. But what other realms of the mysticals do you think we shouldn't be delving in? Chris, you had your hand up, but
I could maybe even answer this one anyway. So have you guys heard of remote viewing, remote perception?
I think we talked about it. He talked about it in the previous one of the previous chapters.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine does it, and he's quite successful at doing these things, but he does it to his own, let's say, his own benefit. Like he does gambling things associated with it, trying to get me involved, and I had to strictly tell him absolutely not. It would be against my guru's will. But it's very easy, I think, for people not on a yogic path to be seduced by these sort of techniques. But you would, my opinion, rather focus on the thing that lies behind that gives you the power to do it, rather than all the fanciful gifts that come with it. That's maybe one thing that you could avoid. It's quite popular. It's gaining popularity these days, I think.
What about mind control and mind reading?
Definitely also trespassing.
Isn't that just social media?
Boom, shots fired. Also, communicating with our lost loved ones is probably something we should stay away from. Maybe going too deep into our past incarnations is probably something we should stay away from. There's a few of those we don't really want to.
Guruji told Brother Anandamoy, isn't it, when he developed that technique to look into his past without even telling Guruji just randomly came up to him and saying, don't do it, don't go there. And then he had to force himself to stop, even though he was enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never know what you find there. So sometimes you just asking for trouble when you go down this route, I would assume. So Guruji goes on to talk about psychiatry and psychoanalysis of the West, and then he starts comparing. He says there's very little research done to analyze mental states and he then compares it to the Sankhya system of yoga, which is apparently different. So there they talk a lot about mental states. And so my first question was, what is Sankhya? I mean, I've heard of it before in different contexts, like Guruji mentioned it here and there in a footnote. And Priyank found a really nice section from the Bhagavad Gita where it is described a little bit. Do you want to read the first section of that, Priyank?
Sure. Sankhya, the highest wisdom, and this is from chapter 18, verse 13 of God Talks with Arjuna, is to have complete knowledge or ultimate enlightenment. The highest wisdom and its consummation in spirit is elaborated in Hindu philosophy in the system of Sankhya and Vedanta. The means to realize the knowledge therein is provided by yoga.
Lauren, do you want to continue reading?
Mhm. Without the renunciation enjoyed in Sankhya and without the technique of yoga, the devotee cannot escape the misery-producing entanglements of physical consciousness and realize the infinite. Both Sankhya and yoga teach how to attain Brahman. Vedanta describes and discusses what is to be found by following the advice of Sankhya and, most important, by practicing the techniques of yoga. All three philosophies point out the same goal, but Sankhya and yoga must be followed first, for without their aid, spirit remains unreachable and unknown. Only after one has realized Brahman does the Vedanta discussion about him become truly meaningful.
Just before describing or talking about Sankhya, he uses the words like there's little research done into the fundamental formations of the normal mental states and their emotional and volitional expressions. A truly basic subject not neglected by Indian philosophy. And the word volitional is important for us because Guruji really jumps on the word volition in the lessons, and he kind of he talks about the dynamic volition and how it kind of links to our like ultimate purpose and how we used to we need to have like really very strong willpower. So that's something that I think is the first use of the word volition in the autobiography, but it's very important in the lessons, certainly.
Whenever I was looking at this hypnosis subject, it's not something, it's in my vocabulary that often, but when I looked it up on Wikipedia, it said that hypnotherapy is a type of mind-body intervention called MBI that's used to create a state of focus, attention, and increased suggestibility for treatment. And the mind-body intervention itself, if you go into that again on Wikipedia, says that it's a health and fitness intervention that is intended to work on a physical and mental level, such as yoga, Tai Chi, and Pilates. And I thought that was really kind of interesting that it's, if you dig into it, it actually connects to yoga and this mind-body intervention piece. And Yogananda himself talked a lot about using, your volition, but using your mental powers to be able to overcome your suffering, mental and physical suffering. And you can use that to your own benefit. So you could maybe not even feel pain at all. That's within our capability if you were to use your own mental power that way. So I just thought, what was maybe the limitation of that? If you were to simply use that with yoga, it's pretty cool that we have, drugs to be able to induce states in people that, you don't have to feel pain in surgery and things like this, but we have that ability. And Yogananda did talk about that quite a lot, to be able to overcome your suffering simply through your focus and mental power.
Yeah, isn't that one thing that Mahatma Gandhi talked about, or that Guruji talked about Mahatma Gandhi, that he had surgery done on him without taking any anesthetic and even having like a pleasant conversation with his students while he was surgery performed was performed on him. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, Yogananda talked about it as a form of identification. That's the root of it. So that if you disassociate yourself, from your physical form, your true self from your physical form, then that's actually at the root of it, which is really, really quite interesting, which is what the drugs do, which is what the hypnotherapy here is doing, as Yogananda says that, it's somebody else's sort of mind taking over you or suggesting to you. So you're disassociated from your own body in that sense. So it's really interesting how spot on that is, and it's aged very well, what Yogananda said, as ever.
Yeah, his things tend to age really well. But he continues now. So now he explained how this was possible, and that was a real astral manifestation. And he now continues. He says that such miracles performed by Gandha Baba, he calls them spectacular, but spiritually useless, which is, when I read this for the first time, was quite harsh. I was thinking, oh wow, this is not what this is about at all here. It's not really just about your own spiritual progress. Yeah, I wonder if any of you was surprised when you read this for the first time. Maybe not, but when I read this for the first time, I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty much a good guideline. Yeah, Frank?
I thought it was really like harsh sounding because this is like the first time that he talks so critically of anyone or their practices in the Autobiography of Yogi, and he's certainly done it for very purposeful. He's very intentionally done it, hasn't he? To take our mind away from all these people that can claim to do all these magical and miraculous things, and this is obviously one of them. But interesting, he doesn't say that. He doesn't criticize the Swami himself or the saint himself to say that he's nowhere in his spiritual path or whatever. It's just that what he's doing in the world, i.e. drawing crowds because of this, is not the way. Because what's really happening, like, he said that is it not good to show, he was telling young Mukunda, is it not good to show the masses the power of God? But who's coming to see him? It's not an earnest seeker, is it? It's not someone that's yearning for a guru or yearning for any realization. It's someone that just wants to be awed and wowed, and then later on they'll just go, he'll just be a household name. Oh, that's the guy who can perform, bring out perfumes through the back of his hand or whatever, and that's the end. That's the end of their spiritual journey.
Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, very few people will then take that forward and go, why, how can you do that? Let me try and do that. But then if you're trying to do that yourself, then you're not going towards God, you're just trying to go towards the miracles. So it's like the hit rate is extremely low to like move people spiritually.
Yeah, I had very similar thoughts and feelings, but I suppose Yogananda is all about efficiency, isn't he? He talks about the airplane mode to God. He talks about Kriya being that fast track to God. So he's very much about efficiency. So initially when I heard it, I thought, well, that's maybe a bit harsh. Like maybe he's doing a lot of meditation that I don't know about in the background, and he's got great impact in the background. But I think you're probably quite right that he could be using his powers in more impactful ways to those who really need and demand an influence. And the only thing that I would say though is imagine the people out there, the masses that are just in it for entertainment. That's going to stay with them throughout many incarnations. So maybe somewhere in the back of their mind in this life or the next, they actually have that impression on them. So it's maybe not all wasted, is my hope, to caveat that bit.
I'm not sure if Guruji really criticizes the spiritual state of Gandha Baba. Like he calls him a few times the saint, and he says he has a high state of spiritual realization, otherwise he wouldn't be able to do those things. So, but it goes to show that even if you have all of those things, it doesn't mean your goal in this incarnation is to show people the way home, to show people to self-realization. It seems like his mission is to make perfume, right? And it's just very different. And maybe that's also why it's mentioned in the book. Guruji just says this also exists, and this won't get you where you want to, so don't follow that thing either.
And some listeners who have read Phil Goldberg's book about the biography of Yogananda will say, Yogananda did this to draw crowds when he was in the US. You know, he had various like performing acts and people doing superhuman physical feats of strength. Like he'd literally advertise those kind of things to get people into the stadium, into the lecture hall. But that's it. So that's how he got their attention, and the rest. So 1% might be about that demonstration of some physical superhuman strength, or like other things that he used to do. But the rest of it, he'd switch to God and talking about the profound aspects of, you know, meditation and how to live a life that's conducive to meditation, etc. So that was his technique. He had to draw the crowds initially that way because he had to make a imprint, I suppose, on the US cultural fabric. And if he just advertised it meditation, the way to God realization, I dare say that many people would have. He may have got a few sincere seekers, but not as many numbers as he used to get in the crowds when he was on his American tours. The first couple of lines in this section that we're discussing is awake in God, true saints effect changes in this dream world by means of a will harmoniously attuned to the creative cosmic dreamer. I think it's really, really lovely sentence there. And that also describes volition as Guruji describes it, and something that we should attune our willpower to and develop our willpower to attaining. And he also refers to in this the will of the will that's harmoniously attuned to the creative cosmic dreamer, i.e. God. And in that he's kind of also answering my previous question about you know, where I mentioned about hunger and poverty and disease and war and all those things that are you know present in this world. Why not eradicate them? Well, that's obviously, as Lauren said, that's not the will of the cosmic dreamer, is it? And that's essentially why he kind of reaffirms that. Nice.
And this first paragraph there that you mentioned, Priyank, has a footnote on it. The footnote just shows a short section of an essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson that's called Compensation. I'm just going to read that out. It says, the universe is represented in every one of its particles. Everything is made of one hidden stuff. The world globes itself in a drop of dew. The true doctrine of omnipresence is that God appears with all his parts in every moss and cobweb. It's very beautiful. Becoming a big Ralph Waldo Emerson fan the more I read those footnotes.
It's awesome, isn't it? It's so good. Every time I hear something more from him, I think he must have been a truly enlightened soul, you know. What do you think he actually meant by dew there when he says that the world globes itself in a drop of dew?
Isn't it that single like raindrop on a blade of grass or whatever, or in the morning calm, early morning dew? No.
Yeah. But I mean, it's an analogy, no? So
the world, he's saying the world it globes itself in that. So he's kind of comparing the whole universe and in that dew, is it not? Is that how I interpreted it?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm muddling it or not, but I got the impression of consciousness that it's, everything is made of one hidden stuff, like we're descending, spirit descends into matter and so on. And then the globe itself is, itself in a drop of dew. I just got the impression of consciousness. I thought, wow, if that is what it is, he's delving deeply behind the veil there.
I like that idea. When I read that, to me the picture came where, like sometimes you do it in a movie of like a drop of water, and then the camera zooms in, and then suddenly you see like a whole thing in there, maybe even the whole world. Yeah. And then Guruji goes on. So we already talked about that those wonder workings are spectacular, but spiritually useless. Then he starts quoting a 10th century Persian mystic called Abu Said Abu Khayyar. I don't know if I probably butchered it really badly. I'm sorry. And
say it how it should be said in German. With a German, maybe
I don't
closer.
think that will. No, I don't think so. I made an honest attempt, so I think that's the closest I will get today. And he says he basically ridicules fakirs who are like Muslim ascetics from his time, who have like powers. I guess they can maybe fly, or they can teleport themselves, or they can walk on water. And then he says things like a frog can also walk on water, or he can live in the water, or like the vulture is in the air. So that's not really that special, because God already created creatures that can do all those things. Yeah, Priya?
Yeah, it's an interesting mystic, isn't he? Especially from his writing. I feel like I need to read up more about him. But Guruji certainly loves Sufi Islam in a way, because he talks about, he's got a whole book about the Rubaiyat of the Omar Khayyam, and Kabir. He talks about his poetry and in fact he describes Kabir as an incarnation of God, so an avatar. So this is how highly he speaks about some of these Islamic preachers, that Sufi mystics, and they've got a very different take on Islam and the method to approach God, and it's very, very much in sync with the practices that we do, and the practices of Indian and Buddhist thought in terms of meditation and discipline, and also the mystical elements of life, and the way we're interacting with creation and things like that. So it's something I think probably warrants us to do one day a special episode on Sufi Islam in the context of the mystics that Guruji talks about, especially Omar Khayyam.
Absolutely. I've read the Wine of the Mystic, Dick's book by Yogananda. It's great, but I'd love to do a deep dive on it, because it is a really amazing book.
Do you reckon we can get one of these mystics to come on as a guest?
Do you know any?
No, one of these Guruji that talks about Omar Khayyam or Kabir or Abu Said.
Oh yeah. Can you how would we do that? I thought we should
Channel
channeling people. I don't.
Well, these aren't just people, are they? These are
True. Yeah, maybe
we'll have to meditate on that. How we can make that happen. But then if that does happen, they'll say we don't want to be on your podcast. We're happy to commune.
Could happen.
We're happy to commune with you, and in fact we have done so, but not on the podcast.
What else do you want? Yeah. and then maybe this kind of show of this kind of miracle would be spiritually useless in the end, right?
True. That's true.
So then we would be like the Perfume saint who goes how long did it take you to get this ability is like 12 years. And then Guruji thinks to himself, what a waste of 12 years.
Okay, scrap that. Let's edit this bit out. We're not gonna go we're not gonna find a Sufi mystic.
This will never air. No.
Yeah.
Or will it? You know, we may do it, listeners. That's the four of
Definitely
us
take it
next time
out.
we meet, but not on the podcast live.
Absolutely. So this mystic Abu Said, I googled him a little bit, and he was writing poetry, and there were like a few sentences that were said at his funeral that he wanted to be said. So they weren't reciting the Quran, but they were reciting a poem of him, and I'm just going to read that out. He says, "What's sweeter than this in the world? Friend met friend, and the lover joined his beloved. That was all sorrow, this is all joy. Those were all words, this is all reality." Sounds like very
Nice.
beautiful poetry, and there's probably more where this came from. So also, I think Guruji, when he mentions a poet or a writer in his books in a footnote, that's probably also a recommendation of his to read more on them, because they're probably very spiritual contents that you can find. They're very spiritual poems. Yeah, and one of Abu Said's quotes, they end in this sentence. It says, "A true man is he who dwells in righteousness among his fellow men, who may buy and sell, yet is never for a single instant forgetful of God." And this concept of buying and selling, but not to forget God, is something that Guruji adds a footnote to, that he finds is like a core principle on the spiritual path, where he says it is being criticized by Western writers as like something where you just, instead of doing right action, it is kind of a call for people to not do anything. And Guruji calls this a misinterpretation. He says that you have to do both. You have to do right action, but also always have God in mind. So it's not either or, it's both. It's this balanced life that Guruji teaches. Yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, this concept is quite a powerful one in terms of spiritualizing your everyday actions and practices, and making meditation part of your life breath. So then you're not really working, for example, for your employer, or you're not really looking after your child. You're just doing all these things for God, and that's the kind of feeling I get when I read this lovely quote by Abu.
It's quite a feat, though, isn't it, to never for a single instant be forgetful of God. Like, I often introspect about how many times I haven't, remembered God in the day, and it's astronomical, and I think to actually be in constant awareness and communion and remembrance and devotion to him all the time, that's huge. That in itself is it goes beyond all, but yeah, it's definitely something that we should be striving for, I feel.
And I think someone, in some monastic visits, they like hand out cards for you to like make your own and really meditate on and stuff. And the theory is like nothing's random. Everything is like, they may have like a random selection of cards from Guruji's teachings, but then when you get that one, that's not random. That's as if Guruji has given it to you. And one that I got like, I think probably 10 years ago was this one, which is related to this quote. It looks like this, and I'll read it out. And I've got it in my bedroom, and I've had it there. And it says, "To rouse God, to receive his response, You must offer him your mental whisper songs unceasingly. Unceasingly, which is
Amazing.
quite similar to Avu's
Mm.
saying here, isn't it? But in
And
Guruji's language is sometimes quite potent, isn't it, compared to others, especially
And
for us.
I like that you have this card in your bedroom, Priyank, because I feel like that's one of, like Lauren mentioned earlier, it's so difficult to think of God during the day, right? All the time, because it happens, right? With the mind, you start something and then you go to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, right? And to bring it back to God, one really good thing is to, at least in your home, put like little pictures of the gurus, put little quotes of the gurus everywhere. Like if you have ever been at an SRF retreat, I remember there in the kitchen, there were like little quotes of Guruji on the cabinets and things. And so I think a lot of us do this in our homes, right? To kind of get back into this mode where we worship God while we do our day-to-day tasks.
Yeah, and also I've got my cupboards are full of various things as well. And piece of Lauren's work made it into my cupboard recently.
Aw.
From she led the young adults meeting last time, and we were talking about, was it the 24 qualities of devotee? Was that Lauren?
It's the qualities that make man godlike from Bhagavad Gita.
And how many was it?
You're
Something.
testing me now.
Well, anyway, Lauren like hand wrote those in like beautiful calligraphy, and she gave, like, there's only 6 of us at the meeting, and she gave each of us one. And I was like, can I take 2 more, please? And she had infinite. She'd handwritten all of these and had extras. And I kept one and I put it in my cupboard next to Bhagwan Krishna's picture. It's really quite beautiful. And I also kept one in the young adults cupboard.
Dude.
Sent
Oh, that's sweet.
Dated and not signed yet, but I'm going to get you to sign it one day.
Wow,
Mhm.
it wasn't me that wrote it. I was just copying it out. But it's quite a good practice, I found, to I think I heard it actually from maybe a talk from one of the monks, but you know how writing these, especially that section of the Bhagavad Gita, of those qualities that we can try and live through, it's really helpful. So it was as much of a gift to you all as it was to myself.
So Guruji, he goes on in that footnote. He then says, solitude is necessary to become established in the self, but masters then return to the world and serve it. And he then quotes the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 4. And we have prepared a little excerpt of this, like a little bit of his commentary on this verse. Priyank, do you want to read the first section?
Sure. Through the vibratory state of power, of proper activity of the world in which he has been born, man ascends into the high vibrationless state of the transcendent spirit. By ordered activities of body and mind, and by self-discipline, the devotee withdraws from different vibratory spheres, from gross matter to the finer realms of consciousness, into the region of the vibrationless spirit that is beyond the activity of all creation. Worklessness is, in the mystical sense, is the goal of life. It can be attained not through idleness, nor through material or evil activities, nor as commonly assumed by merely leading a normally good life, but only through intense liberating activities.
A lazy man cannot be one with spirit. If he does not go forward, he is bound to drift backwards. Many seekers erroneously think that to forsake all worldly activities and to remain in idle seclusion is the way to the highest or inactive state of spirit. But the ordinary man, whose mind is identified with the senses and bodily environments, and who equates himself with the breath and body, is imprisoned in a material world. Even if he tries to, quote unquote, leave the world and lives in the seclusion of a jungle, he will find that without proper meditation, his mind will still be attached to his senses. Simple renunciation alone is not a net ample enough to capture the omnipresent spirit. I love how we've all had to really sit in silence for that. And it really speaks, doesn't it? When truth speaks, you have to take that moment just to
take it in.
take it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is this concept that Guruji mentions often, being in the world, not of the world. And it's not an easy concept to wrap your head around in the beginning. Like, it got so easily misinterpreted, like Guruji mentioned, that but he does say worklessness is the goal, but not idleness. Idleness is actually something that gets you nowhere, or probably in completely wrong direction. But he said the only thing that gets you forward are intense, liberating activities. So that sounds like the complete opposite. It sounds like really hard work, and this is really what gets us there.
Lauren, you can go first.
I'm wondering what you all think is an intense. What was it? An intense. I've lost it.
Liberating activity.
Liberating activity. What would that be? Do you feel?
Chris, you can go first.
The first thing that springs to mind is the meditative practice itself, because when I think of intensity, it's intensity of what? Like, it's maybe not physical activity, it's not emotion, maybe it is emotions, actually it's emotions and mental activity to concentrate, with intensity, with the emotions, the devotion for God in meditation. And that's what, we've been taught to do in the practice that Yogananda gives us. It is funny how it is a common misconception when people think, oh, you're meditating. Oh, you're relaxing. I like to relax as well. Oh, I find it so relaxing. And it's like, yeah, well, that you need that to be able to meditate, in a sense. So the intensity doesn't negate the relaxation. It's, for me, the intensity of concentration.
And like Chris said, meditation, and then what we saw in the episode earlier, an honest introspection, something quite heavy to perform. And then just like what we said a few minutes earlier, like one of the important things is also to stay on the path, like unwaveringly, in spite of adversity. So this all, if you just keep on doing that, it sounds much easier than it actually is. I think life will always try to get you off your course, and you have to stay on it. And I think you need some intensity to actually achieve that goal.
And selfless activity, like we talk about buying and selling, but it's not just buying and selling, it's buying and selling and devoting those two pastimes to God. And Guruji's famous quote, when this I shall die, then shall I know who am I. It's all linked to that selflessness, isn't it? Just working for the sake of work. And often we go through like we've done something that as a result maybe a complete waste of time. I often do things at the center that never actually get used. It'll never get never, the outcome never actually transpires. But if you do it in the sense of not doing it for just to watch the outcome or to see the fruition, and you're just doing it just for the sake of doing it, it's a very liberating, intense, I would say, spiritual activity. And ultimately you can't actually see what the impact of your actions or your activities are. On the gross level, it will just be to complete the outcome that you want to achieve. But on the subtle level, the astral and the causal level, it will be to clean your karmic dust isn't it? And that can be achieved through some ways that we just described, i.e. meditation, etc., and introspection and all that stuff that you said. But it's most easily done through actually using your hands and your brain, and actually, because we've been doing that since we were born. And that's why karma yoga, which is, you know, the yoga of activity, essentially, is the most natural one, I'd say, for us, because we've been doing it ever since we were conceived, shall we say.
Absolutely. To summarize, the Guruji gives a really nice quote of Abu Said at the end. He says, his view on a religious life is thus: to lay aside what you have in your head, the selfish desires and ambition, to bestow freely what you have in your hand, and never to flinch from the blows of adversity. Which is really nice. Really, I love it when someone just takes those really simple words and says really powerful, like lays down a really powerful concept, or even many of them. And now comes Guruji's verdict on this chapter a little bit. So he talked to the sage at the Kalighat temple, who was like very philosophical and Tibetan trained. And then he had talked to the Perfume saint. And neither of them are to his liking, really. Neither of them are really where he goes like, I want them to be my guru. And instead, he ends with this last sentence. He says, when I finally met my master, which will happen a few chapters ahead, when I finally met my master, by sublimity of example alone, he taught me the measure of a true man. So he wasn't someone to entertain the crowds, really quite the opposite, because he was quite candid with everybody. But he just lived this perfect life. And that is something that in the end drew Mukunda to Sri Yukteswar and made him want to be his disciple. And this is something, I wonder if this is one of the ways how you find a real guru. Is that something that would attract you as well if you would go out there? Is this like the most honest way, the most believable way to find a true teacher or a mentor?
We're all nodding our heads.
I see nods.
Yeah.
I see nods. Okay.
No one can
good.
see that if you're
Good.
listening, but we're all nodding our heads in agreement.
Everybody's nodding away.
with enthusiasm.
Yeah, they're quite good nods. Yeah.
In the previous, we glossed over the translation of Arnold's Gita from chapter 3, verses 4 to 8. I don't know if you were going to talk about that, Mike. So he talks about, this is basically in the footnote, and it's it's a reference to that beautiful affirmation or the summary on volition, which I said, which was, a true man is he who dwells in righteousness among his fellow men, who may buy and sell, yet is never for a single instant forgetful of God. And in the footnote, he talked about solitude, and then he also talks about basically the Hindu kind of way of life, and the various aspects, such as ahimsa, which is non-injury, and which is also called virtue entire, which is sakalo dharma, which is apparently a concept from the Mahabharata. And then he talks about the Bhagavad Gita, and he references that because in the Mahabharata it's a positive injunction by reason of its conception, that one who is not helping others in some way is injuring them. And this section of the Bhagavad Gita is talking about that very concept inherent in man's nature, that sloth. Sloth is simply wrong activity. And again, he uses Arnold's translation here. You guys have probably what, 10, 12 lines from chapter 3, verses 4 to 8. And again, it's in all very poetic language. And I really like the section where he says, by mere announcements unto perfectness, nay, and no jot of time at any time rests any actionless. His nature's law compels him, even unwilling, into act. So that was a nice way of saying basically what our dharma, or what our duty is, because one way or the other, we have to complete our mission on this plane, this lifetime, or in the next lifetime. We can either do it willingly now, or come back kicking and screaming later on. And then he's obviously, Krishna's telling this to Arjuna, and he's saying it's an honorable act, and basically do your duty, essentially do thine allotted task. So it's quite a nice, simple way of writing some of the quite heavy philosophy in the Bhagavad Gita. Arnold's done here. Mike?
I like the part that says even unwilling, because that's what the mind does often. Like where you go, there's something to do, but you feel like, I really don't want to do this. And the right thing to do is just doing it anyways. Because it's that before you don't do that thing, the next thing won't come around, right? So this is how you keep moving forward. And yeah, if you kind of build up to something, and then you have like this one task that is necessary, but you don't like it, just stepping through it. There's no other way.
I know, Priyank, you've read a chunk of it out, but can we read it all out in case there is someone who would
Go
like
for it,
to?
Lauren.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. Oh. So it says, no man shall escape from act by shunning action. Nay, and none shall come by mere announcements unto perfectness. Nay, and no jot of time at any time rests any actionless. His nature's law compels him, even unwilling, into act. For thought is act in fancy. He who, with strong body, serving mind, gives up his mortal powers to worthy work, not seeking gain, Arjuna, such a one is honorable. Do thine allotted task.
Did you do your allotted tasks today, Lauren?
I did, but like I was saying earlier, remembering God in all the actions that we do, you suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't been thinking of him, and it's been an hour or two. But then again, in those moments of remembrance, he's allowing us to remember him again, so that's a gift in itself. But yes, we must try and do our allotted tasks with divine remembrance and serving him.
Yeah, I have not done many of my allotted tasks today, but it's only 11 in the morning. So, okay, there's still time.
Have you done all the ones that you should have done up to 11 o'clock?
No comment.
Energization.
No comment. No comment. There's no comment. I'm just... This, yeah, I think I did some of them, and some of them I will do. Like, I have this kind of, sometimes I do all of them in the morning, sometimes I do them throughout the day. The main thing is they get done, right?
Yeah. Always trust Priyank to call you out, Mike. Always be at the ready.
Oh, I wasn't even talking about our practices. I was talking about brushing your teeth, having a shower, maybe. That's kind of good noble pursuits.
Good noble pursuits, yeah. Like I said, I did some of them. No, I'm usually someone who gets up early, and so I'm more active in the morning than the evenings. So I think we've done really, really well with this chapter. I think we've done it. We tried to do it justice. Priya, you added a card about summarizing the chapter 5, how it went from quite some real philosophy to more lighthearted story. Do you want to lead this?
Sure, yeah, the heavy philosophy. It was like really a meeting of two or three different people, wasn't it, in this book? So first he met this saint that was kind of he was new, he was unknown, he was kind of neutral, but his philosophy was quite heavy, wasn't it? And Mukunda kind of talked about him in a feeling of like one of mutual respect, and you know, questioning each other and all that kind of stuff, which was quite nice. And then came the real inquisitive Mukunda, the first time we've seen this inquisition type approach, and he did it with some flair, you would say, with that discussion with the perfume saint. And he wasn't just doing it, in my opinion, just to call the perfume saint out. He kind of also, because he himself was intrigued, and he wouldn't have gone to see him if he wasn't intrigued. Mike?
Yeah, I wonder if it's also just a lesson for us that, you know, if we go out there and we meet someone who can produce tangerines, then we go like, oh my God, this guy's so great. Maybe I should follow him. But Guruji really gives us, he writes down the rules, what the playbook, what we should actually look for in a guru. And then obviously we have a guru already, but just for all this to make sense, because I feel like the spiritual seekers out there, they would not have made those experiences. And he has made a ton of, like, his search for a guru is really, really interesting, because he really did that, right? He went to a lot of different spiritual masters, and then when he finally found the one, he kind of tells us why he was drawn to that one.
Indeed. And when he went to the perfume saint, he didn't just question him, he also he tasted what he had to offer, in the sense that he accepted the perfume in his hand, and he took the flower that was infused with jasmine, which then he took to his sister, and that was the third person who he met. And obviously that's someone that he's got a lot of affection for, his sister. Is it Roma? Is it? Uma, sorry. And he kind of used her to draw out his own musings on what happened and why, and his experimentation in terms of working things out. He kind of keeps this memory in his bank, doesn't it, of meeting this perfume saint, and then he fully works it out, probably what happened when he becomes a Sadguru Sri Paramahansa Yogananda, when he becomes a Yogananda, as opposed to when he's still working things out as a Mukunda. Mike?
It's interesting also how the perfume saint reacts when he gets all these critical questions, right? He, like Guruji really tells them, so it took you 12 years to learn that, what a waste. And then he says, little sir, you amuse me or something, right? And then he gives him the perfume.
Doesn't say you please my mind.
You please my mind.
I think so.
Yeah, that shows a bit of humility, doesn't it? Because a boy questioning your last 12 years of sadhana and mocking it, really, you'd not the ordinary folk would, I dare say, not react so humbly to that.
Yeah.
But he does, which again shows that he's no ordinary soul. He's quite advanced. But yeah, back to his sister. And so he works things out, and he still continues to solve that problem that he hasn't worked out how this saint did all these wonderful things. And we're told at the end that he'd learned this technique from a Tibetan master, and Tibet comes back, and we discussed that. And Tibet also comes back in the next chapter, because the Tiger Swami, Soham Swami, is the subject of the next chapter, which we will go through. And the link with Tibet is because Soham Swami, the Tiger Swami's master, was also a Tibetan master, who he became his guru. So there's some threads of Tibetan yoga and mysticism in this whole book, starting from the preface, of course, with Milarepa and the other Tibetan masters. So yeah, there's a really cool chapter coming up, and we're gonna break it down. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely, we are. And I think with this, we will end it. I thank you all for listening and for watching. And Priyank, Laura, and Chris, thank you. Jai Guru.
Jai
Jai
Guru.
Guru.